Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to break down the exact mathematics of measuring workforce safety specifically according to the SASB Refining and Marketing Standard. Now, if you're operating in the downstream oil and gas sector, you already know that safety is literally the bedrock of your entire operation. But how do you actually quantify it in a way that investors, regulators, and your own management team can clearly understand and compare? Well, today, we're going to look at the exact formulas you need to track and report your workforce health and safety metrics with absolute precision. So let's dive right into this question. How do you mathematically measure a safe workplace? Because in the incredibly high-stakes environment of oil and gas refining, safety isn't just a vibe or a feeling. It is a precise mathematical equation. We're dealing with the handling of volatile hydrocarbons, highly reactive chemicals, and processing fluids at intense temperatures and pressures. In an environment like that, you can't just wave your hands and say, yeah, we had a pretty safe year. No way. You need hard data. You need a standardized methodology that takes all the guesswork out of the equation and gives you a crystal clear picture of your operational risks. Here is our agenda for today's explainer. First, we'll look at the 200,000-hour baseline. Second, calculating TRIR. Third, tracking fatalities and near misses. And finally, direct versus contract workers. All right, section 1, the 200,000-hour baseline, also known as the math denominator. Okay, so the absolute crucial starting point is this bold number right here, 200,000. It serves as the universal baseline hours for all SASB safety rate calculations. But, why do we even need a baseline? Well, imagine trying to compare the safety record of a massive global refining operation that has tens of thousands of employees against a much smaller regional independent refinery. If you just look at raw incident numbers, the larger company is almost always going to look worse, simply because they have way more people working way more hours. This number standardizes the rate totally regardless of your facility's size. And this brilliantly illustrates the why behind the math. That 200,000 simply represents the total hours that 100 full-time employees work in a single year. Think about it. 100 workers multiplied by a standard 40-hour work week, multiply by 50 weeks a year, which assumes a couple of weeks for vacation, and we all know you deeply need that in this grueling industry. That equals exactly 200,000 hours. By multiplying your instant count by this number before dividing by your actual total hours worked, you're essentially asking a hypothetical. If I had a perfectly standard 100-person company, how many incidents would we have had? It completely levels the playing field. Moving right along to section 2, calculating TRIR, focusing on recordable incidents. So, TRIR. It stands for Total Recordable Incident Rate. This is a metric that tracks actual work-related injuries and illnesses within your operations. Under the SASB standard, this is really your primary barometer for workforce safety. It captures the tangible, physical toll that operational hazards take on your personnel. But the absolutely key word here is recordable. Not every scraped knee or minor headache makes it into this formula. Now, what's really interesting here is the strict definition of an incident. Notice that basic first aid, which is just emergency care before regular medical aid, does not count toward the specific metric. The SASB standard is extremely clear on this. If an employee gets a small cut, someone slaps a bandage on it, and they go right back to their shift, that's first aid. It is not a recordable incident for TRIR. However, if the injury requires medical treatment beyond that first aid, or results in loss of consciousness, requires days away from work, or means the employee has to be transferred to a restricted duty job, or is a significant injury diagnosed by a physician, then it becomes a recordable statistic. Accuracy in classifying these incidents is absolutely critical for the integrity of your mathematical formula. Next up is Section 3, Tracking Fatalities and Near Misses, where we track critical events. Now, tracking the fatality rate is unfortunately pretty straightforward. It strictly measures work-related deaths using that same 200,000-hour math. But NMFR tracks near misses. These are unplanned or uncontrolled events that didn't actually result in harm or damage, but easily could have under slightly different circumstances. This is arguably your most powerful predictive mathematical tool. A near miss is a massive red flag. It's the system literally telling you that a hazard exists and your barriers failed, but hey, you just got lucky this time. By tracking the NMFR, you're measuring your proactive safety culture, your ability to spot and fix flaws before they ever show up in your TIR or, much worse, your fatality rate. Okay, let's get into Section 4, direct versus contract workers, and specifically, who you need to count. Think about your temp agency workers compared to your salaried staff. The standard requires you to track both of these categories independently, as long as those contract workers are supervised or managed by your entity. You cannot just count the people on your direct payroll and ignore the massive army of contractors turning wrenches out on your site. If your management team is directing their day-to-day work, controlling the site, or supervising the project, their hours and their incidents absolutely must be tracked and reported. This rule is here to prevent companies from artificially lowering their incident rates by just outsourcing all their most hazardous tasks. And remember, these incidents must be new cases occurring in the work environment. And that environment extends well beyond the physical refinery to include entity equipment and even travel done in the interest of the employer. It's also absolutely crucial to note that you cannot count an old injury flaring up. The incident has to be a new, distinct event triggered by an exposure in the work environment. The SASB standard is highly specific here to ensure that the data you're tracking genuinely reflects the safety of your current operational environment.
All right, here is the ultimate deconstruction of the SASB standard. Whether you're calculating TRIR, fatalities, or NMFR for direct or contract workers, the math works the same. You take the specific incident count, multiply it by 200,000, and then divide by the total hours worked. That is the tracking formula you need to memorize. Take your total recordable incidents, multiply by 200,000, then divide by every hour worked by your relevant workforce. Repeat that exact same process for fatalities. Repeat it again for near misses. And you do this separately for your direct payroll employees and your managed contractors. This matrix right here is exactly how you translate the chaotic reality of a refining operation into a standardized, comparable mathematical metric.
I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder. Are your near misses being recorded, or are they just being ignored? Because, this universal math is ultimately only as reliable as your workforce's culture of safety reporting. These formulas are mathematically flawless. But think about that near-miss frequency rate for a second. If your workers are afraid of getting in trouble for making a mistake, or if they feel like reporting a near-miss is just a bunch of tedious paperwork, well, they just won't report it. Your NMFR will mathematically drop to zero, making you look incredibly safe on paper, while your actual operational risk is skyrocketing behind the scenes. So as you apply these SASB standards, you have to ask yourself, are you just doing the math, or are you actually building the culture required to feed that math-accurate data?